Hello everyone, I am Aaron Schober from Sword, Carolina, and I have a question regarding cutting from the weak side. Is it better to use my long edge or my short edge, or are both useful and applicable? I'll give you a little background on myself. I train predominantly in length and armor's longsword, mostly unarmored fencing. And I am left-handed by birth, and by the first year I spent learning HEMA, but now I fence right-handed. So I fenced left-handed for a year, realized I was going to end up teaching, and so relearned everything right-handed, so it would be easier for me to teach to the majority of people that come here which are right-handed. So what I've noticed when I cut from my weak side, if I am just doing a regular overhow or cut from above from my weak side with my long edge, which I've always just assumed was the correct way of doing it, my wrists end up getting crossed and I end up getting very uncomfortable. I can still perform the cut. I've taught myself how to cut, so I can cut into long point, I can cut into a hang-in, I can cut all the way through. I can do it, it's just uncomfortable. Obviously it's not going to be as useful as a cut from your strong side. From that way you have a better mechanics, better setup. It's just always you want to fence from your strong side, but you're going to end up cutting from your weak side as well. So one thing I've noticed that as it got uncomfortable for me, probably now that I think of it, especially with gloves on, but even without gloves, just having the wrist crossed really tightly. One of the things that was more comfortable for me was to actually turn my sword and cut with the short edge from my weak side. I assumed that was because I'm left-handed, and so it was some artifact that I was bringing into the mix. But what made me possibly rethink that was I had a lot of new students coming here, and most of the people that come in here, they've never held a sword before, they've never swung a sword before, apart from like a Nerf one in their life. And so I'd give them a sword and just let them swing it, and I've noticed several times they'd swing from their strong side, their right side with the long edge, and as they swing from the from the weak side, and they would turn their sword over and swing with the short edge. Doesn't necessarily mean anything. It could just be that they were new and didn't know what to do and were doing it wrong. It could be that I'm doing it wrong too. So what I wanted to get feedback from you guys is, number one, if any of you knows any historical source that actually specifies one way or the other, if this is useful, if they say like don't do it or do it or it doesn't matter. I just hadn't seen that in my own studies. So that could just be from my own ignorance, if anyone knows specifics on that. Primarily from length and armor's longsword, but if you have other information too, I won't turn it down. Obviously, if it's something from saber fencing, it may not apply to what I'm talking about here. The other thing is, if anyone has any experience doing that yourself, like if you oh wow, I did that too, or I used to do that until I discovered this, I'm really open to any kind of experiential advice you guys have for me as well. But it is more common with me, so I'll just show you some of the cuts from it with the short edge. I will say that a lot of it may have to do with the way that I grip my sword. I keep a pretty loose grip on my sword. I like to keep the thumb on the flat of the grip, if you can see that. So as I'm cutting with the sword, I don't have a really firm grip on the sword. I like my fingers to play around a little bit. So cutting from here, switching over on the other side, this would be cutting with my short edge for me versus cutting with my long edge from my weak side. So hopefully you can see this. I'll face you first. If I'm cutting from my strong side, I will almost always use my long edge. I can cut with a long nort, I can cut into a hang-in, I can cut through. If I'm cutting from my weak side, I can cut with the long edge as well. I end up crossed up. I prefer cutting with the short edge and cut the long where it cut into a hang-in, cut through. I also like pairing these together, long edge, short edge. So long edge, short edge, long, short, long, short, long, short. I just want to know if I'm completely off base or not. I'm going to show it to you from the side as well a little bit. We find the best place to stand so you can hopefully see what I'm talking about. So go over the short edge, cut into the long point, the hang-in, cut through. So that's all done with the short edge. And obviously I do have a loose grip on my sword. I'm not gripping the sword with my knuckles out the whole time, otherwise it would be very uncomfortable. So it could be the way I have my grip. I have another student who he keeps a much wider grip on his hands, and so his wrists don't really cross when he cuts with his long edge. So it could totally be an artifact of myself. So that is my question. I would love feedback from you guys. I would also love if any of you have answers. If you would post them in video format, that would be ideal. But you know, I'll take what I can get. And if any of you have questions, I would love for this to become a thing where we have video question and answer with you guys. So once again, Aaron Schober from Sword Carolina. Thanks.